Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S MindLab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever feel like you are stuck with a kind of depression that just won't budge no matter what you try? Well, this new study dives deep into a special kind of therapy and asks, can it really help when other treatments haven't today? We're going to explore a fascinating reanalysis of a study that looked at intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, or ITDP, for people with depression that has been really tough to treat. We'll find out if it actually works, and more importantly, how it works. Does it fix something specific, like a broken part? Or does it create a general sense of things getting better all at once? Let's dive in. The big question here is about treatment-resistant depression. This is when people don't get better with standard treatments like medication or regular therapy. It is a really tough spot to be in, and there is a huge need for effective options. This study focuses on ISTP, a type of therapy that is a bit different. It is short, intense, and all about getting to the heart of hidden feelings and defenses that might be keeping depression going. Basically, the idea behind ISTP is that when we're young, if we experience hurtful things with people we rely on, we learn to push down difficult feelings like anger or sadness because expressing them felt unsafe. These push-down feelings can get stuck, and over time, they might show up as depression. ISTP tries to help people safely bring these feelings up and process them so they don't have to hide anymore. So how did they find out if this SDP works for really stubborn depression? They took a group of people who had tried other treatments and hadn't gotten better. They split them into two groups. One group got 20 sessions of SDP over 10 weeks, meaning they saw their therapist twice a week. The other group was a waitlist control, which means they didn't get the therapy right away but were offered it later. They measured everyone's depression levels and some other feelings related to emotional expression and distress at the beginning of the study, right after the therapy finished, and then again 3 months later. Now, for the results, this is where it gets really interesting. When we look at the depression scores over time, you can see a huge difference between the two groups. The people who received ISTP saw their depression scores drop dramatically. It wasn't just a small dip, it was a massive improvement. Look at this graph. The blue line, representing the ISTP group, plunges down after treatment. The red line, the waitlist group, stays pretty much flat, meaning their depression didn't really change. The difference between the groups got even bigger by the 3-month follow-up, so ISTP definitely seems to work. And it works big time for people who are struggling even after other treatments. The effect sizes, which are like a measure of how big the difference is, were enormous. We're talking about effect sizes of 1.68 right after treatment and an astonishing 2.50 at the follow-up. To give you an idea, an effect size of 0.8 is considered large. So these are something else entirely. But the study didn't just look at depression. It also looked at those process measures. We talked about things like emotional repression, negative feelings, and general distress. And guess what? ISTDP had huge effects on these too. The effect sizes for these internal changes were also huge, even bigger than for depression itself. Things like emotional repression, which is about how much you hold back your feelings and negative emotions, they all improved a lot in the ISTP group. This is where things get a bit tricky and really thought-provoking. The theory behind ISTDP suggests that to get better from depression, you first need to reduce your emotional repression and negative feelings, and that is what leads to getting rid of depression. It is like a chain reaction treatment: less repression, less negative feeling, less depression. So they wanted to see if the changes in those process measures actually caused the drop in depression. They did these complex mediation analyses to check if the improvements in things like emotional repression were the reason people felt less depressed. And here is the surprising part. When they looked closely, it turned out that changes in emotional repression and negative affect didn't actually act as mediators. They didn't seem to be the cause of the depression improvement, even though both depression and these process measures improved a lot. It was like the theory predicted a specific order of things happening, but the results didn't show that order. There was one measure called distress that seemed to mediate the depression outcome, but it turned out that this distress measure actually included the depression score itself. So it was like measuring how much depression improved by looking at depression scores, which is a bit circular and doesn't tell us much new about the mechanism. When they removed the depression part from the distress measure, the mediation effect disappeared. This led them to look at the timing of everything. Did changes in the process measures happen before the depression got better? They used cross-lagged analysis, which sounds fancy, but it is basically asking, did earlier changes in repression predict later changes in depression? Or did earlier changes in depression predict later changes in repression? And the answer was no. They found no clear evidence that one thing consistently happened before the other. The changes in emotional repression, negative affect, and depression seemed to happen all at the same time. It's like the therapy created a general shift across the board. So, what does all this mean? It is a bit of a puzzle. We have fantastic news on the effectiveness front. ISTDP works incredibly well for treatment, resistant depression, perhaps even better than other treatments, and the benefits last and even grow after therapy ends. That is huge for people who are suffering. But the how is still a bit of a mystery. The study suggests that ISTDP might not work by a step-by-step process of fixing specific emotional blocks that then cure depression. Instead, it seems to create a broad, simultaneous improvement. It is like ISTDP creates a really good therapeutic environment where many helpful things happen at once. People feel less defensive, more emotionally open, and less depressed all around the same time. Why might this be? The researchers suggest a few possibilities. Maybe the way they measured things with questionnaires at intervals wasn't frequent or precise enough to catch the very fast moment-to-moment changes that happen in therapy. ISTDP theory talks about unlocking the unconscious. And maybe self-report just can't capture that. Other studies that looked at what actually happens during therapy sessions using observation have found that those emotional breakthroughs do seem to predict improvement. So it might be that the tools they used in this particular study weren't the best fit for measuring the core mechanisms. Another idea is that maybe the theory needs a little tweaking. Perhaps ISTDP works through something called common factors, like the quality of the relationship with the therapist, feeling hopeful, and being engaged in therapy. These are important in all kinds of therapy. Or maybe different people get better through different pathways, and averaging everyone together in a study hides those individual differences. It is also important to remember the study's limitations. They only had 3 measurement points, which isn't a lot to track complex internal changes. They relied on self-report, which, as we discussed, might not capture everything. And the study was done with people in Iran, so we need to be careful about assuming it works exactly the same way everywhere for everyone. So where do we go from here? More research is definitely needed. Imagine studies that check in with people every day, or even several times a day, during therapy, combining self-reports with actually watching therapy sessions, or even looking at things like heart rate to measure stress, could give us a much clearer picture, comparing ISTDP not just to a waitlist, but to other types of therapy that are known to work, would also be really valuable. Ultimately, this study gives us a really important message. ISTDP is a powerful tool for helping people with treatment-resistant depression. The effect sizes are massive, and that is a huge deal for clinical practice. While we're still figuring out the exact step-by-step recipe for how it works, the fact that it works so well is undeniable. It highlights that sometimes in science, we know something is effective long before we fully understand every single detail of its mechanism. And that is okay. For individuals struggling with depression that hasn't responded to other treatments, ISTDP stands out as a highly effective option. What are your thoughts on this? Does it surprise you that the therapy works so well, but the mechanisms are a puzzle? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this breakdown helpful, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S MindLab for more science made simple, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of the mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.